Hello, I'm Julia Miller, and I'm going to talk to you about digital preservation for the masses, creating and publishing workflows and guidelines for institutions and under-resourced organizations. I'm the data manager for the ARC Center of Excellence for the Dynamics of Language, or CODAL, and also a digital archivist for the Pacific and Regional Archive for Digital Sources and Endangered Cultures, or Paradisic. And I'm zooming to you from beautiful Ngunnawal country. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work. This custodianship was never ceded. I would like to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal elders past and present, and to acknowledge any First Nations people watching this presentation. Creating public documentation is a crucial step in providing transparency of archiving processes, helping maintain consistent institutional knowledge, and making available resources for those wanting to know about digital preservation, archiving, or data management. These resources can provide guidance for other archives, but perhaps more importantly, to empower smaller communities with fewer available resources wishing to preserve their own cultural materials. I'll now step you through the archiving guides and workflows. So this is the overview page. And as you can see off to the left, those are all bookmarks to the different pages, and you can see the different content that's included on these. At the top of each page, there's a little search bar, so it can actually also direct you to where you might want to go. So you wanted to look at metadata. Then you can type it in and it'll take you to different locations within these pages. There's also a date at the top of each page, and that tells you when the last contentful edit took place. So you can kind of be assured that the content is up to date. People have different goals and skill sets. So I've arranged them at the top where we have getting started with Paradisic and metadata management. This would be if you're just getting started with and you don't know much about archiving, these guides can help you. And then the next guides offer suggestions when you're ready to create content for archiving. Say you want to know what the standard formats are for audio and video recording, and then also digitizing manuscripts and field notebooks. If you're interested in audio visual processing, these guides can help. We have audio digitizing of analog tapes, including cassette tapes and reel-to-reels, and processing born digital audio files, and then also born digital video files, processing them with FFmpeg, or also processing them with Adobe Media Encoder. And then we have quality control right here, which is obviously a very important thing that we want to be across. There's also improving communication access for deaf and hard of hearing people. This is a very important resource to make available for those of us who want to make our research more accessible. So moving on to getting started with Paradisic. This is just how to get started with Paradisic, signing up as a Paradisic user and teaching people how to access materials that are in the collections in Paradisic. Also, how to become a Paradisic depositor, and just some guidelines on maybe how you should begin. Think about what kind of data you want to archive, how is it organized, you want to have one collection or more than one collection. And I've offered some example collections here for people to look at and explore. This bit of information here can step people and inform people through our file naming convention. Our system requires a specific shape of our files or our file names, and this will help people. Next, we have metadata management. Just to note, on the top of all of these pages, we have a table of contents. You can get an idea of what content will be available on this page. This information here outlines a bit of metadata management that you can do in the field while you're collecting data. Maybe you need to create a data management plan. We've helped people create these. And then also outlining a couple of the metadata tools that we use, the Paradisic spreadsheet and LaMeta. This has more information if you're interested in further information. And also at the bottom of these pages, I will include some additional resources that you might find helpful. Standard formats for data collection and archiving is an important resource to be able to provide our depositors. People are always keen to know what kind of formats Paradisic accepts. And we have a list of them here, quite a few. And if people can't find their file formats that they have listed here, they can contact us and we can help them through that. It talks a little bit about what we get in and then what we put out into our archive here. So this outlines some of the parameters we have for our archival copies and our access copies. One of the things I really wanted to do in these guides is to offer low-cost options. This is the first page that offers a little bit more information. So we have audio recorders and video recorders here. The first one listed will be a little bit more expensive. It's still kind of middle of the road price-wise. And then a less expensive option. Got that for the audio recorder as well as video recorders here. Now let's talk about the digitizing manuscripts and field notebooks. And so this is, what I outline here are the target formats for the images to be archived with Paradisic. We photograph field notes rather than scanning. And then I have quite a lot of information on the equipment that we use at the ANU node of Paradisic. So there's some really rich information here about the cameras, what's the difference between a compact digital camera versus a DSLR, why one might be better than the other. Got tripods in the stands. This particular tripod is great. It's got the center post that is reversible, which allows us to then set it up so we can have our own little photo stand with a tripod. And then another option is a clamp, a shelf clamp. And then if you have the tripod with the removable post, you can then use it with a shelf clamp. And these are a couple of scenarios where I've done this, where I have the DSLR camera set up and doing remote capture and hanging from a shelf. This is another setup where I'm just using the digital compact camera and it's just capturing straight to the SD card. And then of course there's the photo stand. Talk about software here. This is for the remote capture. And then of course the post-processing, there's a few edits that one might need to make after capturing. And so this is the workflow for that. And this is one of the really technical training manuals that I have online. It's a great resource for when we have new staff or we have a new research assistant, or if there's a researcher who wants to come in and use our facilities, I can give them training, and then they also have this as a reference to do follow-up work with. So this really goes into great detail about the remote capture software, all the different settings, then the post-production of the images. And again, like I said, I use Adobe Bridge, and all of the settings are here outlined for people to reference. And then, as I mentioned before, we have the low-cost option. The hardware in this has been designed so that you can use inexpensive cameras and tripods rather than the more expensive photo stand. And then also we have lower cost software in here. And actually these are free. Adobe is not free. It's quite expensive, whereas we have raw therapy and Darktable are a couple of options that allow you to do edits in raw image and also batch processing and exporting of TIFF, which is our archival format. This is another guide that has a lot of information for training purposes. And so this really goes into great detail about the studio setup that we have for digitizing both cassette and reel-to-reel, the computer that we use, the sound card that we had to purchase to allow us to connect to our ADDA converter. And there's a lot of links in here that will take you to YASA's technical reports, where they mention what these parameters are and what you should be looking for when making purchases of this kind of equipment. I have the models and images of the cassette players we have and the tape players we have in our studio. And there's some more guidelines on the use of reel-to-reel machines in the following the link here. The software we use here is Steinberg WaveLab Pro. It's rather expensive, but it allows us to create really beautiful, high-quality audio as we're digitizing, and it works great with our software. And this again is a resource for our staff to use, and just to keep everything consistent between our nodes. It's nice to have a reference that we can go to. And also, maybe you haven't digitized for a while and you've forgotten. Well, this will always be here to go back and reference. And this is for cassette tape. And then we also have the digitizing reel-to-reels and how to thread the machine. All of that steps you through the process here. And then I have some low-cost options as well, where we've got a couple of free software, which actually allows for audio recording at 96 kilohertz and 24 bits. You could do post-production as you could in Adobe's Audition, which is what we use for post-production. And then I have some less expensive equipment options, such as using a Zoom instead of the ADDA converter. This could be a great audio interface where you can connect it directly to your tape deck. You can record directly into your SD card in the Zoom, or you can connect it to your computer and use something like WavePad to be the software that captures the information. I had a couple of setups here. You can read about it. Remember, if you are using a tape player that has a mono headphone jack, you will not capture the stereo content of that cassette. And always, always test your equipment before playing the tape you are intending to digitize. It is best to get the device serviced prior to use, and then try out your entire workflow on stereo practice tapes to determine the best configuration if you're going to go that route. Audio processing, as I mentioned, we use Adobe Audition for our processing. And this is mostly for Born Digital. So say we get a lot of files. Sometimes we get files where one of the channels is flat, like silent. And, so there's some things we need to do. Maybe we need to boost the gain. This is where we would do that. This page is currently under construction, so there's not a lot of content on it. But again, I'm going to be having some low-cost options, including FFmpeg and then the WavePad and Ocean Audio. This is where I will be adding more content for the video processing with FFmpeg. This is a free tool, and if you can get beyond the fear of using a command line interface, this can be a very powerful tool. You can do batch processing. Say somebody gave you a bunch of AVI files, and you just want MP4s, you can do that. If you want to extract audio files or WAV files from the video, you can do that quite easily. If you want to concatenate a bunch of separate video files, I'm coming up with the key recipes that I use for the work that I do, and I will be putting those up here. But most of our post-production, well, not post-production, it's most of our video transcoding happens in Adobe Media Encoder. So we use that to create MP4s and also MXFs. And since 2018, we've been able to create lossless archival JPEG 2000s. And it allowed us to shift this bit of the workflow and keep it in-house rather than sending it out to a commercial service provider. And again, this is a really rich resource with all of the settings, all of the windows, and the different parameters you need to be aware of to make a compliant archival video for Paradisic. And then quality control. Yeah, this is very important. We want to make sure that we're creating really high quality transcodes of our files before we send them into the archive. And Media Area Tools has created free tools for us to use, us being everybody in the world. Media Info I use all the time, and it allows you to interrogate the structural metadata of your media files. And it is very easy and very important part of my workflow. Also, when I get a bunch of files from a depositor, the very first thing I do is use Media Info. They offer a batch processing where you can export all of the structural metadata from the files and have it output it into a CSV. And what this does is it allows me to, one, create an inventory of all the files that I've received from a given depositor. It has file names, file sizes, duration, frame rate, aspect ratio, overall bit rate if it's a video. It's got channel information for audio. All of that information is there. And so what that does is it allows me to then understand, it informs how I'm going to move through the rest of the workflow when I start doing my transcoding for archival purposes. And then it allows me to go back and check the original parameters and specs and see if I have adhered to what the original had, what the shape of the original files. So this is a really important tool. There's other services or tools that Media Area has put out, but this I think is a really great one, the Media Info. And I'll be adding to this and explaining more how I use the Media Area tools later. So watch this space. As I mentioned before, this improving communication access for our deaf and hard of hearing colleagues, this is very important, but I will leave this to you to peruse at your leisure. And then finally, we have these workflow documents. These are more really technical documents. We have, 3 units, 3 nodes, and we all have slightly different workflow. This kind of will tease it apart. All 3 of these still need to be refined, but they are really helpful for all of us when we're just working in different areas. These guides and workflows are currently being used to introduce new archiving workflows to the Paradisic team, training materials for new staff, research assistants, volunteers. I've been working closely with our ANU archives to create a means for PhD students to engage with archival materials and join in the digitizing process as a part of their linguistic research. And I've hosted one of hopefully many more students from Charles Sturt University's Masters of Information Studies seeking job placements with Paradisic. These guides have been added to their curriculum. So if you visit these workflows today, you'll see that some of them are flagged as works in progress, but that in the end is the point. These are not static documents. They are evolving, dynamic, and will be responsive to feedback we receive. And finally, I just want to point out cultural institutions, including the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, IATSIS, and the National Film and Sound Archive, NFSA, have discussed their concerns in getting their magnetic tape holdings digitized by 2025, a deadline beyond which access to functioning digitizing equipment will become increasingly difficult and costly. Collaboration and capacity building will bring us closer to preserving at-risk cultural material before it's too late. Thank you.